Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to Basic Binges, part of Nom Talk Network. On this show, we review popular shows while eating and drinking our binge-worthy snacks and drinks. If you're watching live, please don't forget to redeem those channel points. Redeem them carefully, because last time it was so funny, but awesome, but funny, but also tedious. But do it. Redeem those channel points. We love it. I am your temporary host for the evening. Mike Manalo is taking the night off, doing some wonderful and amazing things, probably just being amazing and being a scroll at some other location. But I am your temporary host, Jordyn Orozco, and right now I'm enjoying some lovely chicken chow mein that my dad made in the wok. So it's yummy and
Ugh.
delicious. I had some ribs and some like mac and cheese casserole, but I was like, I want some wonderful little chow mein. And of course, as always, I have my wonderful, beautiful, and amazing scroll Mai Tai, provided to us by Cutwater. Please sponsor us, Cutwater. We love you. You're awesome. And while you're rebranding, you might as well rebrand for Nom Talk Network. But other than that, I would love to say hello, welcome, and hi to my wonderful guests for the evening who we cannot do these wonderful reviews. Let's say hi to Michael, Toni, and Puma. So good to see you all. Puma, good to see you again for the
Thanks.
second episode. And Michael and Toni. Toni, it's been a long time. I haven't seen you in a long time, so it's so good to see you. And Michael, it's been a minute. So let's start
Yeah.
with you, Michael. What are you enjoying? What are you eating right now?
I've got a little mac and cheese here, chicken mac and cheese. And I'm enjoying, and it's so hot. I had to get the coldest thing in my fridge was like an old lemonade, so I'm drinking that.
Nice. That sounds
Yeah.
yummy. And Toni, it is so good to see you as always. What are you nomming on? What are you snacking on?
I actually we just got dinner and usually I eat a proper dinner before I get here and then maybe like munch and snack on something else. But yeah, I'm actually in the middle of dinner and we went to boiling crab. So
Ooh,
got fried
Wow.
oysters and
Fancy.
I don't know if I'm gonna actually eat this during the stream, so I might just have to wait till afterwards. I've got full-blown crab legs.
dang. There it
Potatoes.
is.
Nice.
Yeah, man. So yeah, but that's what I've got. So who can say what the
You
mood will
know,
strike?
who knows? Who knows what tonight is going
Where
to
this
bring?
night will go.
Yep.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it looks really good. And Puma, good to see you with your eye patch. It is so
I'm doing my
wonderful for you to.
Fury chic,
I love it. Oh
Or
no, it's like Fury Slay. That's what
yeah,
I'm
there you
getting
go.
from you. What are you nomming on? What are you chomping on?
I'm like the yassification of Nick Fury. But
That should be an album. That should be an album
um,
by
of
somebody.
course, this is how you can tell I'm a scroll. If you don't see me drinking whiskey, that means it's not me. I'm always sipping on whiskey. It's my beverage of choice. And I also went to H Mart the other day, and we got these really cool little ice cream things. I don't know what they are, what they're called. It's watermelon flavored, and it's amazing. So I'm gonna this is my partner's and he left it in the freezer and went, so I'm gonna sneak it and I'll buy more later. But yeah.
You're like, sorry, it's mine. So,
It's hot, I'm
um,
sorry.
it's hot. It's ridiculous. If you're in
I'm
California,
parched,
anybody in California, yeah, like anybody in California, you already know shit's about to get real this summer.
Yes. Ugh.
But yes, it is so good to see you all. So, if you haven't already guessed by my background or what we're talking about tonight, we are talking about Secret Invasion Episode 2, which was a doozy. I think for me, the denial of Maria Hill's death sort of set in for me at the beginning of this episode, and I teared up, and surprised. I was like, oh, the scene where they're taking her casket out, and Fury has that moment with her mom, and then just continuing on to sort of tie in the events after Captain Marvel to what we are sort of talking about, tonight, which is this episode, and sort of seeing the sort of depths of the the depths of what Gravik will do, right, in order to get that sort of like to get scrolls to have their own planet, right? And so let's just dive into this episode because there's a lot to cover, right? There's a lot of things. There's actually a lot of like funny things, but then also some serious topics to talk about. So, as we talked about last time, I know when Jen was on, and I think you, Puma, had said, like, we kind of don't want to believe that Maria Hill is dead. I was like, I hope they do some sort of like a Coulson thing, right, where they brought him back for Agents of Shield, but clearly she's dead, right? And Nick Fury is having to sort of deal with these emotions about her dying, right? And like her dying for him. But then the last thing that she saw was him killing her and her believing that it was Nick Fury that killed him and him knowing that it wasn't, right? In the very beginning of the episode, we see the promise that Nick sort of made to the Skrulls, and the one that Talos definitely wanted them to sort of acknowledge and be a part of, and they all were a part of that, right? In case you didn't notice, a lot of the kids and the children that were in the episode, they can't transform yet, and that included Gravik. I don't know if you noticed that, and Gaia, who were the two that didn't transform, but everybody, that was their promise that said, we're behind you, we 100% believe you, we will protect the Earth from these threats, right? From these other threats that are coming down from that. But as we know, 30 years later, he still hasn't sort of, fulfilled this promise. One of the most impactful scenes, and we can sort of scoop that in with this scene, is Maria Hill's coffin, right? Like her coffin getting put onto Air Force One to get taken back to the States, right? And her mom is clearly there. And I sort of foresaw Nick Fury like making an entrance and the mom being like, what the fuck, right? I thought she was gonna slap him like for a moment, and she didn't, and Nick sort of had to deal with that right in that moment. But I almost kind of think that he didn't necessarily deal with it. He kind of just made excuses and didn't necessarily like fully take responsibility for the fact that like this person who I looked up to, who was my right hand, is dead, right? But I want to first get to you all. What did you think about it? What did you think about that scene in the moment? What were your reactions? Let's start with you, Toni.
I appreciate the closure of confirming that Maria Hill is dead. So that was first and foremost. Like last week, everybody was flipping out. How could you? How dare you? What did you do? And it's like me from like one, we're getting to the point where like the franchise itself is over 10 going on 15 years old. This is the constraints with live action adaptations. Like you have to deal with live action restraints, which are people want to move on. People can't play the same character forever. The other thing about the MCU is that if that person is still alive within the universe, why are they not constantly there? It's not something that you have to deal with in a comic book. It's not something you have to deal with animated. So I think it's always, for me, I thought the reaction to her death was, while indicative of how beloved she was also kind of, I didn't care for the reactions of like, well, how dare this lowly Disney Plus TV show take out Maria Hill like this at the first episode. And it's kind of like, well, that should tell you how much weight they're trying to put behind their TV entertainment. That this is not just a random, little knockoff. Like this is part of the MCU. And so I appreciated the scene for that, just the finality of it, the closure, the confirmation. Because I know everyone was like, maybe it's still a Skrull. And it's like, they've already established what happens when somebody dies. Their body immediately reverts back to their natural state. So we know that's not what happened. And to have that of like, her mother is there and now the emotional fallout and how that may motivate him going forward. Yeah, I didn't care for the lines where immediately, the mother is like, so this is your fault. And it's like, I'm sorry, since when is terrorism the counter-terrorist fault? Like, I never care for that kind of thing I never care for that trope in any place. But I do like how, we didn't linger on that and she didn't immediately storm off and say, I blame you. You did this, you're at fault, and just walk off. That, she did say, whatever this is for, I hope that you make it worth it, that my daughter's death is worth it. So I did appreciate that. I appreciate the scene. And this actress, I cannot remember her name, but I see her everywhere. She's a fantastic character actress. I'm so sorry that I didn't confirm the name before jumping on here, but I loved her. I loved her in this scene. I thought it was a really, really well acted scene. So I definitely dug that. And especially where one of my chief complaints about the MCU is that we don't really get to see much of funerals and memorials.
Yeah.
And that moment of closure, that was like a huge sticking point that I had in Endgame, where it was like all of these people that meant so much to not only us as viewers, but to the world. Like the most we got was the Tony Stark, lakeside. And while that was great and awesome, I just kind of felt like that scene could have definitely, been extended and even further, like, and then of course the criticisms were, well, why does Toni get one and not the other heroes that we lost along the way? So I definitely appreciate mostly everything about the scene.
Yeah, and I do have to agree. I think the redeeming line was her being like, well, then you need to make this matter, and her death not to be some just what like blah, and it just kind of like didn't matter. And I think that sort of not invigorates, but it sort of gives him sort of motivation to do what he does later in the episode, right? Which we'll get to in a minute. Michael, what did you think about this? What did you think about the beginning, the sort of introduction to going back to 1995, sort of going back to after the events that happened in Captain Marvel, all the way up to him promising, the scrolls a planet, all the way up to Maria Hill's death.
I thought it was really
Confirmed.
good that they actually fixed a plot hole that I had a problem with in the first one, was that they left on a spaceship to go find a new planet at the end of Captain Marvel, and like, well, how does it that they're still on Earth and they're like, they're doing all this stuff, and it kind of addresses that in that one scene. So that like he gathers them all together. They couldn't find a planet. They're back on Earth, and they're like, okay, Captain Marvel is out looking for going to help us out, and in the meantime, you guys can stay on Earth as refugees. That I think I appreciated the fact that they fixed that plot hole that I thought I kind of lingered from the first episode. So that was really good. Also, I liked how it kind of sets up the graphic thing. How I didn't realize that in the first episode that Nick Fury had known Gravik, but I guess it might have been mentioned in the first episode, but I missed it. But I thought that was really nice, a nice touch, and a nice touch that like Gravik and Gaia were like, they kind of knew each other from back then, so it like explains a lot of the relationship between the two of them, and also some of Gravik's background and history. And then I had a feeling that one Skrull, the one that introduced Gravik, would come back later, like, and of course she does, but we'll get to that later. And then as far as the funeral goes, I appreciate the fact that they actually had the funeral also, like Toni said. Like they never really, I feel like they gloss over deaths of characters like Quicksilver and Black Widow and stuff like that. Only Tony Stark really had a funeral. And so it's nice to see the repercussions of this, especially since she's actually she's a part of the Marvel universe, but she's a regular human being. She has no powers. And so it's very final. It's very you have to like address the fact that like, she's a government agent, and she'd definitely have like a casket with like the flag draped over it and stuff like that, and have full rights as a member of the government to like, be escorted home like that and stuff. So I like that they went to the details of that. And as far as like the mother confronting Nick Fury, I thought that was really well done. I thought that like she played it the way a mother would, a mother that has accepted that her daughter has this really dangerous job and is like, this could happen. Like she knew in the back of her mind that at any time this could happen to her. And so I feel like she's angry, but she still understands this is what was going to happen. And when she says, make this worth it, I almost felt like that was kind of like a thing that everybody was saying. Like the people that watched the show are like, you better make this worth it, because we all liked Maria Hill. So it's like, I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, and then last but not least, Puma, it looked like you had some difficulty getting that open.
It was not. I was hoping nobody saw it.
No, I was like, oh, do you need help? But I don't know how I could have helped you.
I'm like, here.
But no,
yeah.
so what do you think about the scenes, the beginning scenes that we're talking about?
I love so far that this series just kind of starts off with like bam in your face. Like it's like, okay, they can immediately pick up. And then I love how much the acting and the script is like so on point so far. Like I love the impactful things that they're saying to each other, like the mother saying, oh, so you're the reason my daughter's coming home in a box. I'm like, dang, she just went drop the mic on Nick Fury. I'm like, that's Nick Fury talking to him, and she's, you know what I mean? And so just the emotion, the way that everyone is acting, like how they would be in real life. I love how like movie version versus series version, I feel like it's more raw and it's more like personable and like relatable. Like that's exactly how a mother would react in real life if something like this happened. And I just really like I think it was done really tastefully and really impactfully. So I love that they knew how much we were all like, why did you do this to Maria? So I like that they kind of like gave her like they made it, you know, how important she was and how much she meant to like everyone, not just family, not just Nick. Like you could just see how much she meant to everybody that she worked for and was around. So I love that. They did a really good job.
Yeah. So let's get into literally the meat of this episode. Eventually we see the sort of the aftermath of the bombing, and we see that Talos, so we see somebody pick up Nick Fury, and he's like, "Who the hell are you? I'm grieving." Throw him in a van, and then it ends up being Talos. And then they also get the other individual, who then we see later on in the episode, who the other people get, right, or some other people, pick up, and then we see sort of these Russian officers come on this train asking for basically Nick Fury, right? And basically Talos is in a female form. He's in another shell, and basically seduces the officers, and it's like, ooh, like he's not here. Like, why would he be here? Oh my god! And then they're like, okay, sorry, ma'am. And then like he leaves, and then comes back, and then he says, and this scene was probably one of the most pivotal parts of this entire episode. I think it was Talos and Nick Fury finally like coming to terms with I think it was Talos first coming to terms with the fact that he was genuinely hurt that one of the people that he trusts the most left, right, for Saber. And he never really addressed that with Nick. And I think this was Nick's sort of outburst of his emotions dealing with Maria's death. And so we get this sort of powerful sort of this scene where they're both, sharing things that they're just like, shit, Talos basically is like, well, you left, what was I supposed to do? And he was like, you knew how to get a hold of me. And he was like, yeah, but I had I had my species to take care of, right? And then Nick asked him how many scrolls are here, and he's basically he tells him everybody else that left our planet is here on the Earth. And I think he said 1 million 1 million scrolls are here on the planet. And Nick was like, you never told me that. And he's like, well, yeah, but I have a job and I have a duty to protect my species. And he's like, we can't coexist together because humans go to war with each other. We've been at war with each other since the dawn of time, right? Since we've learned to speak, since we've learned to sort of adapt to our environment. What makes you think that we could coexist, right? Especially with another species, there's no room for that. And that was very powerful for me because I was just like, shit, okay, this episode's going to be about a lot of truths that people don't want to hear, but they need to. And then we sort of switch over to the Gaia and the Gavik, where Gavik basically is like, I want to talk to the council before, all of this, while this is still fresh, while our whole attack, on that place that they attacked is fresh. And so we see that scene play out. But before we talk about that, let's talk about this scene in the train, because for me, this was probably one of the most pivotal points of it, where they kind of started to be honest with each other. And then we don't necessarily see them interact at all for the rest of the episode. So that leaves us to we don't know what's going to happen, right? What did you think about this, Puma? What did you think about this scene on the train? What do you think that holds for the next 4 episodes?
Oh man, so that scene was that was probably one of the most impactful scenes to me in the episode, minus what happens later. But yeah, it's just really tough seeing everybody kind of starting to be against their people that they're supposed to be with. That's their team. They're supposed to be working together, and it feels like they're just everything's kind of forcing them to be torn apart and conflict with each other. And that's what's interesting is they're supposed to be sticking together and having their bond and their promise and all that, but honestly, I don't blame Talos because Nick really
Mm.
did kind of just dip out and say, "Hey, I'm gonna go to the store and
Mhm.
get some milk." You know, he went to go get cigarettes and never came back. So, yeah, you know what? He had every right to do what he did. He had to do what he had to do to save his people. I'm sure Nick would have done anything drastic he needed to save everyone as well. So it's kind of like I can't really blame him at all. But yeah, that was a really tough scene to see because I'm like, you know, seeing they have so much history together, and it's kind of just like I get it, but at the same time, it's like wow, like you never really know who you can trust, even if they're not. Well, he is a scroll, but you know, like it's
Yeah.
like they had an agreement, and so it's just like kind of crazy to see that like you really can't even trust your closest people that you think you know the most, and it's like terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's also important where, like in this episode, like I think it's mostly with Nick, Talos, and Gaia, where like I was pissed off at Gaia in the last episode. I was like, really,
Mm.
bitch? Like you really
Yeah.
just told your dad some shit and then it was not true and that was a diversion and then it happened. And then I think in this episode, we sort of see some realizations with Gaia where she's like, shit, like maybe what I've gotten myself into is not necessarily right, like the best option.
Mm.
And it's not the right way to get. So to your point, I see both sides, right? Like I don't want to say like I would do what Gavik is doing, but I understand, right? Because he's like, it's been 30 years and
Yeah.
there's nothing that has happened so far for our species, right? But I also sort of see like Talos's point of view, right? Where he's like, I'm gonna trust in you. And I know like you're this like big wig, like you handle all this stuff, right? You had the Infinity Wars that happened, you had all this shit that had happened in between. And like I get that, but at the same time, like I'm still frustrated, right? Like we don't have a place to live and we're sharing this space with you all and we're keeping our promise, but 30 years later, like you're still not keeping yours. So I see where all of this sort of like confusion or not this frustration can come from, right? And I see how Gavik could go 100% extreme, right? This dude lost his parents back then, right? Like both of his parents due to this like war that his species caused, right? And so I sort of understand and see that. Let's go to you, Michael. What did you feel about this scene in the train? And sort of what do you see subsequently happen after?
uh, I feel like that was also a really important scene because it really drives home just how massive this problem is, how much
Mm,
this this invasion, I guess, is
Mm-hmm.
is affecting the world. Because like Nick Fury didn't have any idea that there was that many Skrulls, and of course Nick
yeah.
Fury wants them to be, he promised that he'd protect them and help them find a new world. But at the same time, it's like he weren't completely honest with them. They
Mm,
when they told him like one number, and all of a sudden there's like he finds out there's like millions more Skrulls living on the earth, and he as a human is like, well, I know what we're capable of, and if people find out about this, it's not going to work out well for you guys. It's not going to work out well for anybody. So I mean, I understand where he's coming from. I also understand where Talos is coming from because like as leader of his people, he is entrusted in trying to help save his people, and they had no other choice but to bring him on to Earth. So you could see both sides, and you could see this is where I think the series is really like starting to form, and you can actually
yeah.
tell what the problem is going to be, like how this is going to be a major, like even more than like the multiverse stuff. Like this is a major problem that needs to be addressed within the MCU. And I think that this is where this show kind of steps up and steps away from all that stuff. And it's like that stuff is going on in the movies, but right now this is really an important thing. And this is people that are fans of the universe need to understand like this is going on and this needs to be addressed. And this is why this show is important. So I
Yeah.
think it basically does a great job setting up of where people can expect the show and the underlying subplot of the whole MCU where it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this whole entire episode, like this whole series, I think is changing the way that I view sort of shows that are now being produced by Disney, Disney Plus on, regarding the MCU. And I kind of said this the last episode, like I have not been disappointed. Like, yeah, I've been like, that's weird, but I haven't really been disappointed with any MCU like series shows so far. Like even WandaVision, right? Like there were some things that happened in there that I'd be like, oh, that was weird, but at the like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I'd say is by far one of the best series produced things that have come out from the MCU ever. It tackles so much. But yeah, absolutely. And then Toni, what did you think about this scene? What do you think the impact is moving forward in the series?
I immediately had questions because all he said was a million scrolls that left and that now somehow landed on Earth. When? Was that back in 97? Is that in 2020 some? Like where are we? Or hell, we might be in 2030, depending on where we're at in the timeline. But yeah, when are these a million? So if it's a million people that landed back in 97, that's more than 1,000 people by this point, because you have to imagine that, like, they're able to procreate, they're able to have kids. We do see, young, small kids. So yeah, so I think it's even bigger than a million. And the other thing I really enjoyed, just outside of like the implications of how massive the problem may be, was the backstory that we got on Nick Fury. Finally got a confirmation that, he's from Alabama and that he's definitely old enough to remember, segregation, especially in the Deep South. I love that, he immediately just talked about his interactions with his mother and about their travels. And immediately I'm like, well, you're going from Alabama to Detroit, what's in Detroit? Is that, do you have family? Do you come from a big family? Is there just like a whole huge Fury family reunion that we don't know about, of just we're like super excited about cousin Nick? I mean, I don't know. But I just immediately love those little tidbits that we get from these characters, because we tend to drop them in these stories where they're just plot point A, plot point B, action scene, and then so on and so forth, rinse and repeat. And we don't really get to know much just about who they are and their own interactions and their backstories and anything that's not currently happening on the screen. If it doesn't pertain to the problem at hand, we don't usually get those tidbits. So I really loved that we were able to kind of like insert, that sort of backstory, regardless if it's actually true or not. I just love the fact that right now, Nick Fury is a guy from Alabama. The other thing I also want to touch upon just overall in the story, they are working so hard, so very hard to make Samuel Jackson look older than he actually does. They are working the hell out of those gray hairs and that beard, the lighting. I'm like, I've seen Samuel L. Jackson. I know how old he is. Like, that is not how that dude looks. He will look the same until the end of his days. He will always be, eternally 45. Like, he is not this dude. And like the fact that they take great pains for him to have a really passionate monologue, because people cough. Yeah. Or he's so winded. Let me just take a breather, sit on this bench like an old man that I am. Yeah. So that was just one thing where I'm just like, they are doing so much to convince us that this is old man Fury. And I'm like, it's not been that long, guys. It's not been that long.
Yeah.
And in Endgame, he was totally fine. Totally okay, in full, health as far as we could tell. So, yeah, but overall, loved the train scene, loved everything that was included into it. I liked this, the back and forth. I love when Marvel folks get to talk and it's just camera A and camera B. I love that.
Yeah, I think one of the most important points is like, especially with these series, is like now we're getting into sort of the nitty gritty when it comes to people of color, especially in the MCU, and sort of introducing those sort of equitable and like those equity and diversity issues, right? Like we definitely see this later with a scene with Rhodey where basically he's like, oh, okay, so you've become that boy, like you've become the government's bitch. And like they don't necessarily say that, right? But then when Rhodey delivers the news, he's like, okay, I see you now, right? And it becomes that sort of like that, like if you do come from a certain culture, you do come from, like it's the look, it's the one word, right? It's the thing that, and you're like, oh, so now he sees him in a different light, right? And I appreciate that, right? Like that's exactly what happened with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right? Like where we get those like, oh yeah, the first super soldier was a black man, right? But of course, because he was black, they didn't want to necessarily promote him, so then it was Steve Rogers, right? And we get those sort of like we get the segregation talks, we get the references to all of that, right? And the fact that like the MCU now is not like devoid of that, right? Like they're trying to introduce that history into these shows and into these series, and I think that's amazing, and it's beautiful to see on screen, to just kind of get that affirmation. I definitely want to talk about Davik's scene with the council, or Gravik's scene, excuse me, with the council, because every time they introduce like a new character, whether it's the news or whether it's some Flash thing, I'm like, that's a fucking scroll. And I'm so happy that this council confirmed my suspicions, right? Everybody, like the guy on the FXN news, who, if you didn't like notice, took like a hit at Fox News. I was like, oh, that's hilarious. And then it was, the person that was in the UN, and then we have somebody that is the prime minister for the UK, right? Like we get in this room where he tries to go and visit the council, and they're all scrolls. And I was like, I knew it. I knew it. They're infiltrating us, right? I'm halfway partial to believe that Dylan McDermott is a scroll, but I'm not going to say anything because he's a little fine little daddy, so I'm not going to say anything now. But let's talk about this scene, because after this, we clearly see that Gravik is basically enforcing his authority into the world and into the scroll sort of like hierarchy, right? He basically is the general now of this sort of war that he wants to take on with humans, right? This scene had a lot of dialogue. It had a lot of, I definitely thought that the woman that left was going to get killed, but she didn't. So I was like, oh my God, she's going to get offed. But she wasn't. And he was like, you won't get hurt, I promise you. And I think this is sort of when we see Gaia's sort of curiosity get peak, right? And she's like, I really need to know what's going on, because this guy is keeping a lot of things from me. And I feel like she knows this. And so this scene right here, I think the thing that I took from it was like, dang, so he basically is the authoritarian in the entire sort of like rebellion against, Nick Fury, and he's pissed, and I get it. What did we think about this scene? What were your overall takes from it? Michael, we'll start with you. Was there anything that you caught that you were like, oh shit, like it's getting like really bad now?
Well, the main thing is that once the scene starts and they're going to the meeting, and then he says, if I don't come out in an hour or something, shoot this guy in the head. And I was like, oh, like he's not, he must be like a low level guy. Like he's worried about his own safety here. But then as the meeting goes on, you realize that, oh no, he's actually more important than any of these people. Like he's got them in his pocket basically. And he's the one that's pulling all the strings. I'm like, wow, it's like you go from like, you start thinking that like, oh, he's just kind of a rebel leader, and he doesn't really have much influence. He's got to convince everybody, and he's going to probably be at odds with his own people. But then you realize, no, he's like the mastermind. He's got everybody like working for him. So it kind of like it just solidifies how big of a threat he personally is. It's like, it's not just the movement, it's him, and you got to deal with him before you can worry about like taking out the movement. He's the head of it, so you gotta figure this out. And the fact that I don't think they realize that yet, so it just kind of like it sets up so much more like drama for what's going to happen in the coming episodes. And also it's like you can see that guy is kind of like putting two and two together. She's kind of like being curious about things. I'm like, a little too late for that. I mean, you're already kind of like deep in there, like someone just, like a lot of people just died because you acted wrongly. So it's like, I don't know. I wonder if she is doing these things out of guilt, or if she's doing these, or she's always been like really like curious about this, and she's just want to blow her cover or something like that. So there's a lot of questions that it answers, as far as like who Gravik is and how important he is, but also it introduces a lot of questions like like basically like as far as Gaia goes, and as far as like who else in the council, is there anybody in the council that can stand up to him? And it's like, is there anybody that wants to stand up to him? It's like, there's one person, but can she do anything about it? Like it seems like she can't, because they have all these people that are in high places, the head of NATO, like UN and stuff like that. And it's like, wow, this is like a stacked deck against Nick Fury and everybody else trying to do right here. It's like I don't see how they can come out of this. So it's really interesting. It raises the stakes. It's
Mhm.
it sets it up for good conflict.
Yeah, definitely. Just to let you know, Eric's in the chat. Hello, Eric, Heartless7. He redeemed hydrate, so everybody hydrate with whatever you are drinking with. Take a little sippy sip. Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, this definitely set the scene for a war that's coming up, right? It definitely set the scene for something that is going to be more menacing, and like I said, establish his authority within that, because the minute he got back to home base, they all knew about it. And so, you know, these are people that believe in him. These are people that will follow him to death, right? And so definitely something to watch out for. Puma, what did you think about this scene with the council? How did it affect you in regard to this episode?
It pretty much kind of like how you said, it kind of solidifies like how badass Gravik really is. He's not gonna have any mercy for anyone. I really like that he said, I wrote down the line because it was super badass. I was like, hold on, let me see. He said, he said, Earth's gonna be our home because I'm gonna take it, pretty much. Like he's just like, you know what, like he's pretty much like the Malcolm X of the scrolls. He's like, by any means necessary. And I was like, all right, Gravik. So it sucks because I feel for him. Like it's like he's not a good person, but I feel for him because he's really just trying to like take care of his people and get what he's deserved and promised. So but that was a really powerful scene. And pretty much like you said, I thought the lady was gonna get killed. I'm kind of like, okay, that's kind of interesting that like he killed the other guy that was being interrogated or whatever, and then let her go. That was kind of interesting. So it does show that he does have some sort of kind of compassion or mercy, or maybe he just didn't care. I don't really know why that happened, but that was pretty interesting because she kind of undermined him. And yeah, it was kind of interesting to just see his character just keeps developing more. You're learning more about him. You get to see a little backstory about like how much he really hates. He never liked Nick Fury from the beginning, so it's kind of like interesting to see him at that young age where they do the flashback scene, seeing how he interacts with them there. Then when you remember about the last episode, seeing how he interacted and was like, you know, the smirk he gave him and the whole like vibe he was giving Nick Fury during the bombing scene, versus now he's kind of just like, you can tell he's just gonna gun straight for Nick Fury. Like I feel like there's gonna be some epic battle coming up later on between the two of them specifically. I'm excited. It's so good. So good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this episode like showed a lot of people like what's to come, especially in the next four, about like what might happen and what could entail from possible things, right? And we're going to talk about two of the best scenes I think so far in the entire episode. But Toni, I want to get first your reaction to sort of this council scene with Gravik. Oh, you're on mute.
Ah, I was trying to like save you guys from my weird eating noises. I'm so sorry. No, I was just saying that I don't respond well to just blind ambition and villains. Like it's just kind of like laughable. Like I'll take over the world. Okay, why the world? Like all right, cool. Be original, I guess. And so this idea of like taking over, literally just taking over the world was just kind of like, all right, okay, lofty aspirations. But then when Shirley, the world leader that doesn't go ahead and submit to him, and she says, you know, exactly what she needs to say, and it's a very powerful statement about their history and why she doesn't support any of this at all and will not be submitting. And I think she's very aware of the fact of like, all right, these might be my last words. So immediately I just was like, man, that's a badass lady. That's an amazing person. I immediately wanted to know more about her, who she was and where she fits. I'm trying to find out what I can about her, but all it says is really that she's a world leader on the Skrull Council. And it's like, all right, that tells me nothing. I can make my own assumptions, but I just thought that the actress that played them, the lines that they were given, fantastic. Absolutely loved it. And I didn't respond to Gravik at all until this moment where he says, if I had 100 of you, I could take over the world, the universe, and I just was immediately like just struck by the fact that he's very aware of the people that submit to him are like worse, are like not worse, but like less. They matter less to him than the one woman that's willing to say, like, no, I will not. I'm not going to support this. I can't for the following reasons. And I just immediately was like, oh, okay, now I get this guy. Now I immediately understand that he's someone who, yes, has a mission, has a purpose, and believes in it to the bottom of his soul. But he's someone that's able to respect and appreciate the strength in others. I don't like these prototypical villains that immediately when somebody disputes them or has something to say in opposition to them, they're just immediately gone. Like, we're so used to it. We all thought yeah, this lady is gone. She's dead. She'll be killed in the alley right outside, right? Somehow, some way. There's no way he's letting her leave. But the fact that he's not insulted by her opposition, that he immediately is just like, yeah, absolutely. You're amazing. Fantastic. You won't be harmed. Calls her sister, and just, has that respect for her. I just immediately was like, I like this guy. I don't fully know him and his deal and really what the end, his end game for his big evil plan is. But I immediately just it was a switch, instantaneously, where didn't like him. Oh, okay, now I'm invested on a level that goes just beyond Nick Fury. So that was really, really great and amazing. I also appreciate that Shooter McGavin, Chris McDonald, is there. And that if Chris McDonald is going to do anything, he is going to be slimy and weaselly.
Yes.
And just that white dude that you really want to punch in his face because he's just a little too smarmy. And that's exactly the Tucker Carlson, stand-in should be. Perfect casting. I don't think he had a single word to say. And just him being him and just his physical performance was just I know exactly who that guy is. Even if I had not seen the scene before where he's doing his Fox News, thing, I knew exactly who that guy was. And it just was love character actors. Loved it. Loved the scene.
Yeah, it was great. And that definitely was a scene where I was just damn, I'm it was a coup the whole time, right? They were all in on it and they all just fell for it. And so before we get to even closer to we got to end, there's two things I want to talk about. Actually, three things. The first is very quickly. Did you all see that cameo when Gaia was on the computer and Groot was at the very top of the DNA samples?
Yeah.
You did it? Okay, so go back and watch.
They had an ice giant.
Yes.
I didn't get what the third one was.
It was an extremis from.
No, the extremis was 4. There was another one in between. The ice giant. They called it a frost beast. And then there was a third one called something like a obsidian something or other. Or
Obsidian was one of Thanos's henchmen. It was the one with the skinny one with the spear.
Yes.
Infinity one. Yeah.
So that begs the question, were they Skrulls or were they actually, right? So it begs the question that was this secret invasion already happening while the events of Infinity War and Endgame were already happening, right? What is going on there, right? So I just want to put that out there for the world, right? Was this?
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Well,
the interesting thing is that if they're shapeshifters, if they're infiltrators, they could be any number of world governments could have access to those. Mm-hmm. So how difficult would it be for one of them to, I don't know, disguise themselves as a Wakandan or disguise themselves as, somebody from any number of world governments and, just allow themselves into the super secret medical vault and say, oh, we've got a nice little piece of Groot here. And now it's with us. It's just, it's a really, really fascinating and interesting implication that they're everywhere. And it's
right.
I love that premise. Love it. Very excited about where it goes.
Yes. I definitely just really quickly want to talk about the Sonia Fallsworth scene where she's torturing that Skrull. I found this scene, any freaking scene with Olivia Colman in it is beautiful, chef's kiss. amazing. I think she's absolutely wonderful. But this was actually kind of pivotal. And I think for several reasons. I think because Sonia Fallsworth is so important to this sort of story arc, right? Like, I feel like that scene in the first episode with Nick Fury, this is who Nick is going to come to now, after the events of the whole roadie scene, which is the second scene that I want to talk about. I think this is going to be pivotal to the plot of Secret Invasion, right? Because he basically has nobody that he can turn to now because Rhodey has now essentially turned against him, right? But I loved this scene because we kind of get to see her work, right? We get to see her. She knows who she's dealing with, and she gets the answers that she needs, right? She gets all of that. And then we definitely see Gravik doing a rescue mission where these people don't stand a chance against these scrolls. They basically get this this captive guy, and they eventually shoot him because he knows that he told her stuff, right? Like that he told her, secret information about this. And then secondly, I would like to talk about the scene with Rhodey. That was really powerful for me because Samuel definitely reaches into people like us don't get here because of who we are. We have to work 10 times harder in order to be where we're at. And so we need each other's backs. And Rhodey basically says, fuck you, right? Like we see this, he's like, I volunteered to tell you that you're fired. You're no longer a part of the government. The government wants nothing to do with you. And we get that iconic line where Samuel says, even when Nick Fury, he said, even when Nick Fury, yes, and that was so good. I was like, yes. And then we see him do the old man thing where he's like on the bench, and you're like, okay, like take a breath, Grandpa, and then you can like go and do your thing. But I think this scene is so powerful, because basically Rhodey's become the government, right? Like that's who he is now, right? Like completely. He's been through the events of the Infinity Wars. He's been through all of that, and now he has to focus on what this is. And he's basically like, "Yeah, you're no longer our guy anymore." And Nick Fury's like, "Okay, cool." And then let's throw in that little end scene where we're like, "Oh, so you got a squirrel wife at home that you don't necessarily tell people about, right?" What did we think about? I was like, "Good for you, good for you."
Yeah.
Big little diverse interspecies person. Let's talk about these last scenes. How impactful were these for you? Let's start with you, Toni. What did you think about all of these and the culmination of the last of these scenes?
All right, I'm gonna try to do this quickly.
I know it's so much. It's so much.
Sonia Fallsworth is literally the character I've been waiting for. I've been dying for just basically the I don't know if we can call her good, but she's basically not an evil version of Dolores Umbridge. I've been waiting for that character. I've been waiting for someone that will smile in your face, prim and proper, and torture the shit out of you. I absolutely have been waiting for that character because those kind of characters exist, but they're always men. The men are allowed to be unhinged, and the women, especially like in these spy thrillers, they're always like no older than 26, Natasha Romanoff, like cat suits, like they're sexy. They may be amazing and fantastic, but they're not Olivia Colman, literally going to torture somebody with a brooch and a handbag and like a fat speed coat. Like loved it. Could not say enough about that scene. I would watch this entire show if it was nothing but her torturing individuals.
Yes.
Loved it. The Rhodey scene, we always want Rhodey to be more rebellious than he actually is. He is such a G-man. He is such a company guy. He is the guy that is always the last one to jump on, the rebel train and, finally join his friends in the good fight, just because he's always trying to like maintain the status, right? He's always trying to, follow orders to the best of his ability. And then I think there was also something very valid about his response where he's just like, why wouldn't you call us? And that's the thing that he doesn't say. why didn't you call us? Why did it need to be the thing that only you and Maria Hill took on? And I get it, the explanation being, well, we don't know who to trust. But that's difficult to say to somebody that you're now trying to reach out to and be like, please don't like take any consequences out on me, even though there were literally 2,000 dead people lying somewhere in Moscow. Like that's a bit much. You got to admit, like that's a bit much for even him to be like, oh, please help me out here because, for whatever reason. It's like, why would you not? And especially considering that all the Avengers that he possibly could have called, Rhodey would have been the logical choice. He's military, he's in the government, more than likely he does know about the Skrulls. When I also hate the fact that this show is pretending that the Skrulls were such a huge, like perfectly kept secret that there's no way that nobody else but Nick Fury knew, even though there's a million of them running around. And it's like, I'm sorry, dude, didn't you put this in a report somewhere? You're telling me that nobody nowhere in the span of like from 1995 to now, nobody said a word and like mum was the word because all spies are honorable. I just was like amazed at the fact that he just never thought to like, of the people that I could call, Rhodey would be the one that would be able to like, I could get up to speed and I might be able to trust, even if he is a Skrull. Like, but chances are he's not, The last scene with him and his wife. Again, I love when we expand just beyond, the explosions and the chase scenes. And, so I thought that was, once I saw it, I was like, of course, everyone has been crying around about how Nick Fury left. And what was wrong with you? Why did you leave us? How could you? And in my mind, I'm like, it's got to be a damn good reason. And it has to be a moral reason. This isn't a tactical decision. It's an emotional one. And there's not a greater emotion than like devotion and love. So like, absolutely. I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. If he fell in love and he went so far as to leave Earth, leave his work, leave the Avengers for years, like, of course he did. Of course he did. It just made complete and total sense. I hate that we just stopped the episode at that point and we don't get to see, because then the other thing I didn't like is that I was scrolling on Twitter and someone was like, does he know that she's a Skrull? Does he know? And I'm like, this is why I don't like these scenes where it's like you're just ending on a cliffhanger, especially one like this where you're not actually allowing people to like, it is a valid question because it's like, maybe he doesn't. There is that slight chance that he doesn't, but it's incredibly unlikely. And I just don't like the fact that the choice was, let's just really pay the hell out of this Otis Redding licensing fee and just write it out to the credits. But yeah, those are my thoughts. 10s across the board.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong. I think he knows she's a Skrull because that was the same Skrull that brought
Gravik
to him in 95. And so I think he knows, but that's why I'm like, yes, like
I don't want to be a atheist, but I'm having real difficulty telling people apart when they're in the Skrull makeup.
Right.
Tough. So I did not catch that at all.
But we didn't, I don't think, did we see her transform when they all transformed, or was she on the side? Because I didn't see her.
No, I don't think we saw her transform. That's why it's a question. It's still a question.
Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, is it the same? Is it not? Because he greeted her the same way he greeted Talos, but I'm like, that's how all Skrulls greet each other. So I'm like, maybe that was just him trying to. Anyway, okay, let's get to you, Michael. And what did you think about these last scenes? How did that recap the episode for you?
I'll go through real quick. I thought Olivia Colman was amazing in that scene. She's like the proper English spy. It's like I love the way she played it. This is a character that I wished we'd have more of. I hope that she has a bigger part to play in the Marvel universe coming up, because I mean I can't get enough of this character. It's great. She was 100% refreshing and definitely a needed character in this universe. As far as what was the other thing? Oh, Rhodey. I appreciate that it bothered, like everybody gets bothered that like he's so straight-laced and government centric, but it makes sense for his character, and I understand that character because I think you need that character. Because I mean, in real life, there are people that are good people, but they just really, a lot of the times they're, career military and stuff like that, and they just grow up believing that like the military way is the right way, and they believe in their government and stuff like that. And he's not a bad person for doing that, but he's definitely like you wish he would like be better than what like help Nick out a little bit more. You know what I mean? But I appreciate that they are able to differentiate the two sides, the two different people. It's like, well, they're both basically government guys, but Rhodey is like he's very practical. He's very practical as far as like 2,000 people died in Russia. We're on the brink of World War III. Like, yes, you're fired. I mean, it kind of has to happen. So it's like it makes sense that, and I appreciate that he stays true to that character because I feel like that's the character that was established in previous movies and stuff like that. And as far as the big surprise wife, I thought that was great because it gives another layer to Nick Fury, kind of like when we wonder like, okay, so was she on the space station with him the whole time? Did he? Because they have a house. It's like, and it seems like a very well put together house, and he just got back to Earth. So was she there the whole time, or did she bounce back and forth? And did he leave?
I thought it was an Airbnb, if I'm honest. It didn't seem like all they had lived in.
I didn't even think about that. But yeah, it could be definitely. But yeah, I mean, I want to know more about the relationship and like is he trying to protect her? That's why he's like he doesn't like wear the wedding ring and stuff like that, so no one knows that he's married. And I don't know, it's very interesting, and it's got me very curious about like what's going to happen with that. So awesome.
Absolutely. And last but not least, Puma, what did you think about all of this? What did you think about this these last scenes in this episode?
I love Olivia Colman. I wasn't familiar with her at all until this series, and it's like her sassiness, her snarky comments, her one-liners, like whoever did casting, whoever did the script is like a genius because everything just hits. Like it's like almost every single sentence or phrase every character says is just like, damn, like it's not just like random blabbering or just small talk or whatever. It's all like some very heavy phrases, and I'm just like, she's so badass. Like I love her. I'm like, she's probably one of my favorites in this series. Like I'm like, I hope she has more screen time. I hope there's more interaction between her and Nick because she really like did not hold back on him. She had no shame on calling him out. But yeah, that was one of my favorite scenes. That was really good. Girl power, love it. And then what was the second scene? The second scene was Rhodey and Nick Fury, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That one kind of broke my heart because it's true. I love, like you said earlier, I really do love that they're hitting on like racial issues and stuff like that because like especially the first episode, they're like, you can't go walking around at nighttime, black guy in Moscow. And then he talks about the spooks and she's like, you can't say that. He's like, no, you can't say that. Like, so I just love that they're kind of like introducing like racial tension and racial issues, but like in a light way. They're doing it very tastefully. But the fact that they show Rhodey kind of like being like you said, fuck you to Nick, I'm just like, damn, it's true. Like it's really hard. You haven't seen very many black characters in the MCU besides Falcon, and it's just like, to see two of the top ones that you're so used to being around like not have each other's back. It's true. Like that's how you really have to have each other's back in certain situations. Granted, Nick fucked up majorly. He fumbled the ball hard, but the fact that he's like, yeah, I volunteered, I'm like, wow, okay, that's kind of shitty because I mean, there's so many things he could have done. He could have suspended him or something, or you know what I mean? But the fact that he's like, no, you're fired. There's a car for you. Bye. I was like, wow, that kind of hurts. That kind of sucks. But like Nick is Nick Fury. So like that liner, like that was my favorite line of the series so far. He's like, even when I'm out, I'm in. I'm like, it's fucking Nick Fury. How are you gonna fire Nick Fury? You know what I mean? Actually, like the fuck. So that was really cool. And then lastly, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just laughing.
And then lastly, what was the last one?
Oh, the scene with Nick Fury and his wife.
Oh yeah. I feel like I'm trying to recall. I feel like they showed some interaction with them in the first episode, like some kind of flashback or something. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like I kind of saw something about that or some kind of like hint that they were like together or flirting or something. I'm not sure. But that's really cool and interesting to see. Yeah, and the fact that she's just kind of like, I don't really see a lot of security in their home, so it's kind of interesting that like nobody's been able to track him or find where he is, wherever they are. That's kind of interesting to me. I'm kind of, trying to see where that goes, because I'm like, it's Nick Fury. There's no security. There's no like, you're just chilling at a, like you said, almost Airbnb kind of situation. Like anybody could just show up and find you. Someone could be trailing you. So yeah, I'm excited. I hope they show more of like the backstory of where he's been this whole time and what happened and like why he chose to do what he did. Like what kind of decision like did he have to like do to be like, wow, I really need to like not be there for this, even though like literally thousands, maybe a million people were gonna die because of this. Like it's interesting. I want to see. We need to know why. The people need to know, Nick. Okay, why you abandoned us. Okay, you called out Captain Marvel so many times for abandoning us and not being there when you needed it, but then here you go, being on for 30 years. So yeah,
definitely. I feel like it left us with more questions, and I feel like that's how episode 1 was, where we were just like, wait, no, wait, so who, what's going on? And so I'm excited to see where this next episode brings us and this entire series brings us. But unfortunately, that is all the time we have left to talk about Secret Invasion episode 2. It's been wonderful and amazing to hear all of your opinions, to hear your conspiracy theories and where you all think that this is going to go. Shout out to my guests tonight, Michael, Toni, and Puma. Y'all are amazing. You all are wonderful when you are guests as well as hosts. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts about the future of this series. And first and foremost, but last and certainly not least, Michael, where can we find you on the socials?
You can find me on GripC47 on all socials. Yeah, that's about it.
Nice. And Toni, where can we find you?
You guys can find me on all the social medias at the Toni Sanchez, Toni with an I, Sanchez with a Z.
Nice. And Puma, where can we find you?
Pretty much all social media under at PumaDoesCosplay, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I have a Twitch. I need to start posting on this more, but yeah, pretty much anywhere you can find me there. PumaDoesCosplay.
Nice. Oh yes, absolutely. And you can find me on Instagram, City of Stars 13. And definitely, I forgot to mention this earlier, but since it is the last day of Pride Month for the entire month of June, we are fundraising for the Trevor Project. It is a nonprofit organization focused on suicide prevention efforts among LGBTQIA+ youth. So please, if you can donate, please donate to this wonderful organization. They are amazing. They are wonderful, awesome, and they do a lot of beautiful work.
Pride!
Yay! Happy Pride, y'all! We all need to be celebrating Pride. Since we got some news today. We need to be celebrating and in community with one another. So don't forget that the closest people to you are probably the most wonderful and amazing and beautiful supporters of your life. Your life matters, and all of us together make a powerful statement about community and our rights. So thank you again for tuning in. Be sure to join our Discord to keep the conversation going, as well as subscribing to all of our platforms, which are at Nom Talk Network. Tune in to our next show, which I do believe should be sometime soon. I don't see it here. But until then, I'm your host, Jordyn Orozco, and you all have a nom-orific evening. Goodbye.